Welcome. We'll get, if anybody will watch online, we'll welcome you, and probably some will be. As introduction, what are some things that, I wanted to use this book really as a diving board into something else. And you know what I thought of when I went by New York 42, you know that thing that's closed down has the big water slide, it's closed down. It's not, you know, if you're going into town, they shut that down. But I saw a diving board on the side, and I thought, you don't see diving boards anywhere anymore. When I grew up swimming, you know, diving boards are a great thing. I guess insurance has thought they're unsafe. Really, do you see diving boards anymore? So think of some things you don't see on this other board. Diving board, that's one you don't see. That's why I'm not good at this.
I'm so glad I don't see the diving board now.
Yeah. Maybe I'll use one of the others. What is something else you don't see anymore? Can you think of something?
Drive-in movies.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Drive-in. Anybody used to go to drive-in movies or not? Here's one I thought of. Not telephone, but telephone what? You don't see that anymore, do you? Telephone booths, you don't see that anymore? We still type, but you don't really see a lot of type what? Yeah. Because the
Newspapers are dwindling now.
yeah, newspapers is another one. We could add that in there, right? I thought about that because they're doing Beverly Hillbillies production in Farmville. And a good friend of mine, the star, he was on the Daily Reflector, but boy, even the paper's so thin now.
It's jumped up to
Yeah.
$40-some a month.
You always, yeah, most people drop it because the price went way up.
You go to the doctor's office, a place a lot of times it used to be magazines everywhere. Now the places you don't see them. Everybody got the phone there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Code.
Isn't that the
Yeah,
truth?
took them away from the code.
So for the sake of Barbara, let's I don't know everybody, but just introduce yourself because we'll have some others coming in for
Carolyn Spear,
all right.
Debbie Ennis, Shirley Rouse,
Jackie Rouse.
Barbara Ellis,
Dick Rosenbaum.
Martha Furlong.
All right. So join us when you can, Lori. Thank you for doing the food. All right. I did want to look at, and basically this book was written, if you've looked at it at all, it was a, after COVID, you know, rediscovering church. Let me ask you before I look at the pages. I do want to make this biblical, and I do want, not to be I teach, you listen. I want, you know, you to be involved in one thing, several things I will never do. I will never say you have a wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. I will never call anybody out. So feel free to discuss. And if you want to discuss things, this is important to me too. If you want to discuss things personal, I hope we make a pact. It stays right here. You know, so not that you have to, but if you want to, say I'm going to share something personal, then you know. Of course, with cameras on, so that might be an issue. Yeah, that would probably. And if we choose to say, hey, we want to get personal, we can cut that out. We can decide on it, you know. As a matter of fact, it's funny you brought that up because I at my other church during COVID, we had small groups, and I was doing the one at the church. People that wanted to come to church, and that came up. People wanted to share, and the guy was really concerned about it with the camera. And honestly, it kind of eventually shut my group down for that reason. So as we think about it, what are some of the things that you learned during COVID with church or beyond? What are some things that, highs or lows, that you think about with COVID? What would that be for you?
How much being with my church friends meant to me in person.
Yeah. That's a good one.
How people got accustomed to staying home.
Yes.
And looking at, you know, on YouTube or,
Yep.
whatever. Yeah.
That's one of the things that some of you may have gone to when Pastor Keith was doing it. It was a rather large group and then went down. I remember having to record. I don't know why we had three of the preachers recording, but we did. And I remember going out every week with the guys who filmed it. We just did a little room. But I remember doing it, and I remember the most response I got, people wanted encouragement. They wanted hope. They really, you know, that's the kind of messages that were resonating for people that were watching. And of course, a positive is for many churches, I don't know here, but many churches that didn't have any kind of a media You know, it did advance that so people can watch more, so it did, that was a plus, but there was negatives. Anything else that you learned during COVID?
For me, I mean, it's not COVID alone, because it's political, but you know, the people you thought were scientists and medical doctors and so forth, you know, rejected any view and didn't agree with theirs, and that just, it was surprising to me that so much of that came out.
Yeah,
And it's wrong, you know, misinformation during COVID.
right.
And people politicized it, and only one view, and it's pitiful.
Yeah, and I will say here, I'm sure even here we have divided thoughts, so we won't go there about vaccines, non-vaccines. I get it, because that's going to be, everybody's all over the place, and I get it. So we all do what's right for you, but even now, but yeah.
Some people, I mean, I'm not saying it was a terrible thing, but some people just sort of paranoid
Oh, yeah,
because of it. I mean,
yeah,
I've
exactly.
seen people, you know, they were wrapping up the car seats and the steering wheel and, I mean, all this stuff,
Yeah.
you know, and
Exactly.
you know, and then some people was the exact opposite, you know, that stuff, I mean. So it was two different.
If you had any hypochondriac tendencies, it got worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was comparing this. I kind of compared it. We'll get into the study, but with the, what was it, the Spanish flu? I went back because I'm kind of a historian, trying to do some comparisons with that. And one of the things I had to learn from the Presbytery studies is the Black Death, the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages, and they took it strictly from a church standpoint, but what that created for the Catholic Church at that time, or for the church in general, people began to doubt either my prayers aren't being answered, or they kind of had problems with the Catholic Church selling indulgences for the dead, and that didn't go over very well. And then you couldn't go to Mass, just like we couldn't go to church so all of that created, even those Middle Ages, some of it was very similar to modern times. They couldn't go to church, hospitals were full, the sanitary conditions were kind of backwards even to the Roman days when they had plumbing and all that. But anyway, that actually kind of launched the Protestant Reformation. When you think about it, it's one of the things I learned out of that. And then, of course, they had a counter-Catholic Reformation too, which I won't get into. But all of that was isolation because of a disease or what have you. So you still had some of that going on now. All right, so I didn't expect you, this is more of an introduction, but I want to look at these sheets for a moment because it does tie into the book. So all of us have a story, and every church has a history and a story behind it. That's one of the things he said in his introduction. I'm going to go get the sheet, but I want to quote the book for a moment. All right, so this is from the book, from the introduction. I'm just reading a couple of things I highlighted. From week to week, in your church, you can never be quite sure how everyone feels or what everyone thinks, no matter their appearance. Isn't that true? It certainly is. You can't even be quite sure why everyone shows up. That's why you don't know who will come back. And one person thoroughly researched various churches' doctrinal positions before selecting the best match. Another person just needed friends in a new town. One person bounced from congregation to congregation and never found the right fit. We kind of call those church hoppers. At least the term I use. And this book is written by two different guys, and I like the one kind of rediscovered Christianity for himself as well as church, so that was kind of interesting once we look at it. But anyway, so people do go for different reasons. Young people, this is where I want to look at the sheets, but for a lot of people, if they don't have friends in the church, if they don't have a long history in the church, I'm sure this church does, a lot of family generation, but if somebody new comes in and they don't want to establish friends, they're going to go somewhere else. It could be a generational thing. All right, let's look first of all at this one. Pull up this sheet, okay? Because I want us to be honest, and I know not only if you've been, think about your whole life and maybe different churches, maybe this is the only church you've been in. I want you to look at the sheet and be realistic. So this is some of the things that when the revitalization guy comes, he will talk about it. It's not unique to Bill because another guy named Ken Pretty does this as well. All right, so let's look at it. It's small print. Pull out your reading glasses if you need it. I almost need mine. All right, this is a life cycle of the church. All right, so notice the birth part, okay? The birth part. Are you on the same page, John? I remember when I worked at a restaurant, this guy was starting up a church. He was real country. He said, "Man, Brother Bill, we're going to start it up, we're gonna get the chairs out. And he was all excited because they were just starting out. They didn't even have a building. So, it's this one here. You got this, where it looks like that. We have a front and a back, all right? Yeah, maybe I didn't make enough, and I'll make more next time. But, yeah, it's this one here, all right? So it's got that kind of, we've got a front and a back, but I want to look at this one first, all right? You see where I'm at? That one, hold that one up, all right. So follow with me. So the birth part is a lot of times where you have, everybody still confused? You got it? You got it, all right. All right, so the birth part is when a church is born, Sometimes it's a church plant. I didn't realize, somebody told me, I think it was Randy, that this was a church plant from, I don't know what the mother church, is that true?
First Presbyterian.
Yeah. So that's real cool.
The school here.
Yeah, there was a school here, because I
My
talked
mom
to
been here.
yeah,
fine,
the
but-
government.
But the First Presbyterian did, the
Earl,
first
what's his name?
pastors here in
That's very interesting.
Pastor, I can't remember the pastor's name.
What, to begin with?
At First Pres, they started out, but anyway, yes, it came, that's where it started.
Yeah, that's really cool.
If you want to call it satellite.
Yeah. So I didn't know that. And of course, the school part, that was really interesting, in 1943, right? Am I correct on that? I know the governor was the guy that was kind of the church historian. But you all like, whatever your church is, it has a beginning. And then, of course, you go to the belief thing. And, even these non-denominational, well, we don't want to be a denomination. But they still are going to teach something, right? They're going to have something, what they teach. So even in that kind of defines who they're going to be. You can't just be, maybe some churches, we're just in for everybody, but if they're going to be sound at all the Bible, they're going to teach something. So you're going to find out what they believe, and it's going to kind of move you in one direction or another. So, in fact, I was talking with Kay, I had an interesting conversation with her last night. She was saying I think when they lived in Virginia, they had a Presbyterian, and right across the street was a Baptist church. I said, it's probably true for most churches on every corner. And she said, she said, I don't know why they just couldn't get along and do some things together. And I said, I agree. In fact, the church I applied at probably well over maybe at least 10, 11, maybe 12 years ago, it was up in Illinois. We used to live, I didn't really want to go back up there, but it was both a Baptist and a Presbyterian mixed congregation. And so they had a Baptist minister, they might do the immersion, they had a Presbyterian, they do the sprinkling, whatever, but they got along well. It was a nice little group. They were out in the kind of farmland, so it was a mixed congregation. But anyway, think about growth. What is that, when you think about the goals there of growth, there's a high morale, all right? So that's when a church is growing. There's goals, they're focused on the community, and then you get, not necessarily bad, but then we move to the maturity part, all right? So there's obviously grounded ministries, stable, still launching for the future, all right? So then you have definite ministries like this church has, or wherever your church that you grew up in. You can think of different ministries, people are involved, there's growth. It's not just a certain group of people are doing everything. And then now when you hit a plateau, and by the way, you can do this with businesses, you can think about government this way, schools, I was thinking about, I saw in the news, it was a really old schoolhouse, I don't know where, somebody bought an old schoolhouse and was going to make it into a home, but it was a real old schoolhouse, so. This is another thing I thought about that is not, at least in my day, maybe this goes, you're older, maybe you can have this. My day, we had school lockers. You had school lockers. You had to put locks on. I thought, ridiculous. But if you had, I guess the girls maybe put their purses in. Who wants to steal your school books? But we had to put the lockers on. I remember one time in junior high, I didn't realize it. Somebody was peeping behind me and saw me do my combination, and then the next day they put my lock on backwards. So just to be mean, so I had to kind of get, people can be mean in school, but I'm going down, like we have band practice saying, if all these lockers, they're no longer used by the students because everything's, on your phone, or they don't really use books. So there's not a need for the lockers anymore. That's outdated. But it's in all the high schools and junior highs. Think about that.
That's a nightmare to teachers right there.
Oh yeah, you used to, both of you were teachers.
teachers.
Yeah. I'm talking to advanced teachers here, so, or anyway, you can give us all sorts of insights. This can apply to schools in some sense too, but the plateau. So the plateau is when it starts to get a little bit, it's peaking. I think of restaurants that plateau, and then usually if you don't keep having vision, then you're starting to go downhill. When you go downhill is when you get the nostalgia stage. Well, we used to do this, and then it becomes kind of the bureaucracy. There's not a lot of vision toward the future. You get settled, you get established. And then, and I've been in the church where this has happened, where when you get danger is when the red light comes on. This is danger zone when you get to the questioning stage. And this is when people try to control things. You get paralysis. You get people manipulating. You get doubting, whether it's doubting ministry, doubting the minister, or what have you. And then, if that doesn't get curbed, then polarization happens, and that's when you get division, and the enemy has already settled in at that point. And then usually conflict, and if that's not resolved, unfortunately, death. And I'm learning in the Presbyterian, of course, as any denomination, the Presbyterian can start up churches, they can close churches, they can relocate congregations, of course they can do ministers, but it's not just Presbyterian denomination, it's Baptist, it's anything. So have you ever been in, let's not use this church, but have you ever been in another church where you've seen a church go through a life cycle? Have you ever seen that? Yeah, all the way to the end?
People, but I didn't really attend. I attended here, but when we got married, when I got married, I attended Chicago Presbyterian Church.
Meadowbrook.
And Meadowbrook, but anyway, Chicago closed within, I don't know, within probably five years at least.
Yeah, that's
After
sad.
we were married, it closed, and then we came back, or I came back and came.
Yeah. I can use one in town. It's Emmanuel over by the 3rd Street Park. They used to be big in the 80s. They didn't have enough to keep it open, and now Open Door Church has bought the church for their older members. I was surprised, Lauren, I think I told maybe you this, that Open Door, huge church, I know this from a banker that does it, the average age there is 55 and up, which was a surprise. It's one of the biggest churches in town. So age isn't necessarily a factor to growth. But anything else that maybe some of you heard the long time was at the church. I was asking you, I love your stories about the camp. You were telling me.
Camp Albemarle.
Yeah, what was the name of the camp?
Camp Albemarle.
Yeah, it was really interesting stories, but you probably have a lot of great memories in this church. This has been around a long time. All right, let's go to the back part of it. This is kind of the same thing. Just flip it over. And because the Rediscovering Church book kind of highlights some of this, but there's the same thing in a very simple way, what it's talking about. So when you're on the incline, you're thinking about the future, and you're thinking about reaching out into the community. And so the elders are going to have to answer some questions. And sometimes, like for example, this is one ministry that is certainly community outreach, right? The baby pantry ministry, you think of others. And sometimes churches will have that, yet they expect the community, they welcome the community to come in. We're here, we're not going to close the door to you, but sometimes it's not so much we get out into the community. And even then, how do we exactly do that? I don't have magical answers either, So, but feel free to jump in on that. But I worked at a restaurant that went through this, and boy, it was booming. And then we moved away, and I took Lisa back, and it was a steak place, and I thought, where is the place? I know, my memory's not that bad. It's got to be here. Well, it was in parking lot. It was completely gone, So that restaurant went through that whole cycle, and I don't know how restaurants survive. They got more of them than you do churches, but they're all over, right? So anyway, so the bottom part is just kind of another graph that checks it out. Let's go to the other page, all right, the other page. And I want you to look at that part there. Okay, that.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Back up a minute.
Yeah.
On that bell curve.
The bell curve, yeah.
The recline, well, you said incline would be that you were thinking about the future.
The church is thinking about, you're growing, you're moving up on the scale, all right? So that's the idea. And that kind of is more of a simple way of what this is more detailed talking about. So this, probably maybe should have started with this one, but these are the details of what happens when you're on the incline, when you're going up. So recline is not necessarily, well, in my opinion, bad, but then either leadership or people need to say, okay, where are we at and where are we going? Because we're either going to, we might need to make some changes so we continue to grow, or if we don't, we might start on the decline, So it's usually when you're in the deep set of decline, it's difficult to get out of that. What I've discovered, what other ministers have said, is sometimes God may have to discipline a church if the enemy's got in there, and maybe even revitalize the church. Maybe it takes a whole new group of people or reshaping, Not every church, but sometimes that's the situation. Good question. That's what it means
Well,
to
I
be.
think when I see recline, I think maybe you get laid back, too laid back.
Yes, that's exactly
I
what
was
it means.
thinking
Complacent.
recline.
Yeah, exactly.
Lazy.
Exactly. And it's very easy to fall into that when you think about it. So, yeah.
But I've said before, if you're not growing, you die.
Yeah.
That's when you got.
That's right.
Exactly, yeah.
Sometimes age causes a recline too.
Oh, yeah, well, exactly. You can't do what you formerly could do. Yeah, it does, no doubt about it,
One of the places, a club or association we had was, when I was a member of Going Road Riding Association. I forgot how many thousands and thousands of members we had back in the mid-80s, and it kept growing and growing, and the people with the membership was most likely 35 to 40 years of age.
Yeah,
And about 3-4 years ago, something like that, it's gone.
yeah.
It's gone. Had had a monthly magazine, and they gave away motorcycles at events and all that stuff. And it's just like you say, they went up, and then it died.
Yeah. You and my dad, you talk about the life cycle of Burl's Welcome.
Yeah.
That's gone through this buildings you guys were involved, are now gutted and changing ownership, and so it's not just churches, right?
Not just VW, the whole industry.
The whole industry has gone overseas.
So much, we used to have a lot of manufacturing in this country, but there are very few drug manufacturers, and now they've all gone over to China.
Yeah,
Cheaper than they thought.
I knew people that worked at sewing machine, industries in some of the towns, textile industries, a lot of them are gone that were here, so, yeah. All right, so let's look at this one here, and so this is some of the same thing, but kind of rephrasing it a different way. One of the things that grabs my attention on the adolescent stage, maybe it's not the best word, but vision and relationships and ministries. Those are big words, and those are good words for a healthy church. You see that on the life cycle page here? So what comes to your mind when you think about vision and relationships and ministries?
Well, you're real active.
Mhm.
You're gung-ho, got all these different things going on that might appeal to different people.
Yeah. I'll use my former pastor at Arthur. If you don't know, he was in a terrible motorcycle accident. Nothing against motorcycles, and it was a guy that pulled out, thought he could beat him. He's basically brain damaged, and unless the Lord does a miracle, he's not going to come back like he was. But one of the things he used to say, he's Carney, we call him Old Carney before the accident. He used to say, this Barbara, find some other place in the church to get involved other than just the service. You're not going to get everything. He used to say, you're not even going to get spiritually from a message, a sermon. You need to have your own private time. But he'd say, find some other place in the church to get involved. And that keeps you from being in the recline, position. And I always thought that was a good rule of thumb. When you agree with that, and all of you probably are, but there are some that are not. And so if they're not, then they're probably not really connected with a vision. And they may have significant relationships, but they're not really involved in ministry. And sometimes those that are not involved, they get critical of those that are doing the ministry, right? So the maturity stage, again, one person might look at that like, we're doing fine, and somebody might say, it's not necessarily bad, but if you can't really, like you said, if you can't stay, you got to either grow or you're going down. So the vision is still there, but sometimes the structure gets too rigid. The structure gets too rigid, and then you're not flexible. So I was talking with one at this. We're talking about how to reach the youth. And I think this church, just like other church, we all want growth. I don't think anybody's opposed it, which is a healthy sign. I applied at one church one time. It was in Clemson. It was all online, and I use the expression "us four, no more," and that just really cracked them up. You know, because some churches are like that. It's like the Indian circle, you can't get in our group, you know. But that, I don't see this at this church, and I hope if you have other churches, you don't see that. But anyway, sometimes, what now on the decline there, when it gets empty nest, and most of you have probably been to the empty nest with your children, but what does an empty nest look like at your church? Or, I think my dad was closing up the books before he finished up. Well, you stayed through a lot of it. Have you ever been in a plant or a business? You're the final group there before you close and lock the keys. That's sad, isn't it? Some of you have been in that situation. But what does an empty nest look like at a church?
When you don't have young people, young couples to have children, and we
Yes,
don't have children
yes,
here.
exactly. And then, if they come in and you don't see children,
Yes.
then they need to check out. And I was telling Lisa, we're trying to invite some, that I told her, and I told God a conversation with Wanda and other people. If you just get a few in, they will invite themselves. I mean, they will do that. You don't even have to really work at it, really. But it's to get that initial group in, which is always somewhat of a challenge.
I
So,
heard Amanda say, Debbie's daughter, she worked with the youth here for a long time, and had a really good group of youth. But when their parents, if they came, I guess, without children, they didn't come back.
they didn't come back, yeah.
Is that what she said,
Mhm.
You
basically?
mean like to the service?
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't get involved in the church, but they were
Yeah.
really involved with Amanda. She did so many things with them, and her youth group was really great.
Yeah, and that's a whole lot of the
We
homeschool.
had one child in the youth group
Uh-huh.
that was a Hollywood child.
Okay,
All the other youth people were homeschool parents.
yes,
And they went to Open Door, Covenant,
yeah,
or the Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
I believe. And even though they came, they volunteered when we had the great God Loves the Art camps and all
yeah, all
that.
these pictures show that.
They were never encouraged, well, I'm not saying, Amanda didn't encourage them, but they were not, didn't feel wanting to leave where they were to come here.
Exactly.
Just like we've hosted scouts for how long? And I don't recall any scout parent ever becoming
Except
on
Scouts.
Yeah, and I'm trying to work with Sterling on that, yeah.
I hosted I used the fellowship hall for my monthly educational sorority meeting.
Uh-huh.
And hoping that some of those people, because we have 35, 40 each time,
Mhm.
that maybe some of them would eventually start coming to this church, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, at Landmark, the church I was at, the 4-H got involved there, and then the homeschoolers, and they did become part of the church, and it exploded in one sense. And then we did Awana, and it really was so big, I remember, in retrospect, because kids were coming from other churches, and I remember the pastor, we got to start this program here, it become like competition. But the homeschoolers, they can be a great plus. It can be also a minus if they become a group amongst themselves and not involved. But and we had public school as youth teachers, we had Christian school, private school, and we had homeschoolers. So we had to keep them all together and in agreement, which was not always easy. But yeah, anything else comes to your mind with the empty nest? Because they touch on it a little bit in the book, not so much from the life cycle of the church, but how to get back in church after COVID. But the one author I really like, looking ahead, he really is going through his experience of becoming a believer and getting involved in church. But anyway, now you touched on it, the last part, the old age, and that's not, sometimes the older people are the foundational group of the church, and that needs not be forgotten. And we need to glean from their wisdom. I was talking with several people about discipleship. It says in the Bible, we'll look at a couple verses, that older women should be discipling younger women, or one-on-one. And this is why at one of my churches, I took some teenagers, and they wanted to be discipled. And so what I did, you okay? what I did was I took them on ministry with me. If I went on visitation, one of them was a project for the guy. I had one of the guys preach. In fact, he went in the military. He could have been a great pastor. And one of them was a Christian professor. Maybe time flies, but just taking one-on-one time with them, you know. I've used this story before. One guy, he was in the high school band, and he had a classmate that was a Mormon. And it was late one Friday night. I was just tired and get ready to go home. He comes into the church. He wanted to have the Mormon debate right there. And I said, Jonathan, we need to wait and set this up, you know. But he really wanted to, you know, see his Mormon friend converted. We actually did have a very good meeting. And by the way, Bob, you know, that's teaching Sunday school, he's written a great book on how to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses, because a lot of times he didn't know what to do when they came to the door. It's a tremendous book. I forgot the name of it. But anyway, we took him to that Mormon debate, and you probably can't think of Bob's getting fiery, but he really was our quarterback in that whole meeting. And it wasn't like one side versus the other, but we really outmatched them. And we had another pastor and Bob, and it was really interesting, that meeting. I'm going to get off on a tangent, but all that to say that a young person that I discipled wanted to see other people converted to Christianity. It was a good thing. All right, lastly, I think we've covered them all. Go to this one. I'm going to watch my time here. Note just quickly on this one, all right? And you can read chapter 1. If you can get to chapter 2 next week, you know. Again, I'm not going to do necessarily deep dive, highlight things that you think are important. Like I said, I really want this to be a diving board into something else, and I might welcome some of your thoughts of what you might like to study. But anyway, notice this is the same thing, the incline. And I want to look at this for a moment. This is the definition of incline, recline, and decline, all right? So when you look at the first one, do you think churches, and I don't have to use ours, but think of churches in general. You can think of large churches, you can think of medium size or small. Do they tend to be future-oriented, or do you think they're kind of more stuck in the past? Think about a church and the mentality of people as a whole. Any thoughts there? And sometimes, even with a business, if they tend to get in the past oriented, that's when they're quick to be bought out, right? Or a restaurant. I've seen things like that happen. The drive, and it is, I feel, a deep responsibility, because the church tends to take on the personality of its leaders, plural. We're going to look at a scripture in a moment. I'm not going to get away from scripture, but the drive, vision-driven, program-driven, and structure-driven. And I was talking with, and this applies to some of the leaders, talking with Giles about the way some of these things are written in the, sometimes it has a nice little phrase, but what does it exactly mean? You have to get it down to concrete, easy. We want to be vision-minded. What does that mean? So sometimes you have to really write it out so people can understand what that, because that could be all over the place, right? So you go to the eye doctor, and that means one thing, right? You go to something else, and vision-driven means something else. So program-driven, this is interesting on the recline, because sometimes people get the idea, we got a lot of programs, and programs can be good, but some program-driven, then it tends to be only focused on the inside, right? So you can go either way with that. When you have programs in the church, have they been good, or does sometimes it's us four no more with the program? Kind of goes back to what you said. The students were good, but if they get involved in the church, right, then there was a disconnect, right? So anything else on program-driven? What does it mean to be structure-driven?
Well, my personal opinion, as far as our church facility, there have been many things that have, and I'm not talking about necessarily in the last 10 years. I'm talking about a lot, because I've going to come here all my life.
Yeah.
But I have seen many things start, and then they just kind of disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't come to fruition. They don't even build to a good output, or whatever the right
Right.
word is. And but also there is a tendency to the people who are leaders, other people don't want to take over and they want those leaders to continue to be the leaders forever.
Right.
Not ever.
That happens.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to teaching and being responsible, like, for example, the women of the church.
Right.
You know, people don't feel like they can step up and continue what we normally do. And we used to have a very strong women of the church.
COVID devastated.
It devastated, absolutely. We had women's Bible studies. We had 3 groups going at one time.
Mm.
But the older generation ended up being a daytime, Wednesday daytime
Mhm.
thing. But they are all deceased now. And pretty much all everybody but But anyway,
Men's group, too, same thing in the men's group.
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, we had a good turnout of men, especially when John McNeil was here, but he
When
was
John
before John.
left, it went,
But yeah, before John, we still had, different,
yeah.
Yeah, I knew John.
that sprang out from that, the widows thing, I can't remember what
Right,
it's called.
right.
But we had
Every February.
Habitat for
there was a
Humanity.
Lunch.
Habitat for Humanity, we did work
That the
with
men's
that.
sponsor with entertainment.
Mhm.
And, several different things, but now,
Yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about in the book, Rediscovering Church, for those things that have dwindled.
Yes.
Because we are really past COVID, but there, there's, one question for you teachers. Have you seen a change in the students over the years? Or what's some of your experiences being longtime teachers? What comes to your mind?
Well, I've been retired since 2007.
Been a long time, I couldn't make
And you
it.
retired from me.
Too late.
But my daughter was a public school teacher, and my daughter-in-law is a public school teacher. And, of course, she's staying home right now with her young one, but it is just a whole other different world. I mean, we were both priority teachers, but I would never have survived having to do virtual teaching during COVID.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do that without those relationships and stuff.
When I started teaching, I actually had a devotion in my class every day.
And we said the prayer.
And then they told me I couldn't do it anymore. So anyway, I did teach a lot of patriotism. I tried to do that, but
Mhm.
that's not even done today, I don't think. But it has changed tremendously.
That's one of the things, and we'll get your Bible, I'm going to go to Ephesians 4 in a moment, but Bill Moore showed a video, and it has a principle, doing what you were doing, during the lunch hour, and then finally was told you can't do it anymore. So he, or I think it was maybe a lady, got creative and said, come to my house on Saturday or whatever, and that succeeded. So found an alternative way to do it, but it is sad. What they have now, when Kevin was in school, a moment of silence, or, so you can do whatever you want. It did hurt. It hurt my son because he was involved in a big musical production. He had a great, and they shut the thing down. I was trying to get just do it in the summer. I was trying to get the leader to do it. And then I know another lady, son, he was very involved in sports, and it shut that down, and it shut him down. He didn't really want to, he lost all motivation. He didn't want to go to school. He struggled to get a job. And that's not everybody, but COVID did, really. The whole virtual thing was real difficult. If you weren't self-motivated already, all right? So go to Ephesians. So yeah, I'm going to go to Ephesians for a moment, but still looking at the page for a moment, all right? So there you have the structure-driven. Now on focus, I'm still on that page, focus. So it's best to be community-focused. You still have to be, to my mind, also congregation-focused. I think it's not one or the other, but both. I think maybe it's a little stilted, but I think it's both, not one and. But the attitude is so important. The attitude is so important. Innovative, in other words, creative. I remember being in a church, this guy, he was great in leadership, but he got really bored if he didn't keep. He's kind of like you were saying, that he'd start something, wouldn't finish it. So I was always, I got to create something else for this guy to do. it was work to get him in ministry. But he wanted to be, but I felt myself having to try to find something for him to do. But if we can have leaders or a congregation that's innovative on their own, but you can't always fly everybody's balloon, you know. We still are a community, and we have to adjust and readjust. You can't do everybody's thing. And sometimes people are so narrow-minded, they get focused on what they want to do rather than what's best for the group as a whole. But as has been mentioned over and over, when you get complacent, that's bad. Even if you're just complacent in life. But faith is really important. And I like this because, you know, sometimes, now faith is not presumption. Sometimes you can be foolish. You can be foolish with money, even in the church. But sometimes it does mean taking the risk, you know, being vision-minded, all right? So decisions are always difficult, whether personal decisions. Some of you have probably been caregivers have you been a caregiver for an elderly person even when you were younger? I don't know if you had trade-offs or whatever, but that's tough, isn't it? It wears you out mentally and physically if you've ever been a caregiver for somebody. So I've got a couple of in-law people that do that for a living, but it's tough. It really is. A lot of changes going on in healthcare for that sort of thing too. But decisions are always, you know, you can stand at the threshold of decision and not make any, and then you miss opportunities. And sometimes, I'm going to talk about this in the sermon a little bit from the King, sometimes you can be impulsive and you make a decision out of fear or anger, and then you end up making a wrong decision rather than seeking the Lord about decisions. But with all these things, we should be seeking the Lord. But now, a couple others. Servant. Some people have the gift of servanthood, gift of help, gift of mercies, and they should be using that. But like you said, Debbie, sometimes either we expect a leader to carry on indefinitely, or we don't want to step on their toes, you know. But sometimes they might be crying out for help.
We welcome stepping in.
Well,
Just get somebody.
I know I'm speaking for Wanda, who can't be in here right now, but one of the things she's trying to do when her helpers come, she has tasks for them to do, so she's not doing it all.
Right.
So she's getting them in case she can't be there, then they're learning that, and so that's something. Anyway, I like it. Finances is always a difficult one because it's a touchy subject, all right? But investor, Pastor Keith used to say this, and I think he said,
She said she was, you going to say something?
oh, I did not.
I'm trying to figure out where you are.
Oh, I'm on this, still on this page right here.
Okay, because
Sorry.
I thought, we didn't.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
going,
wondering,
no, we're going to Ephesians. I just wanted to finish that part out. But under finances, and Pastor Keith said, and I know and I agree, you know, we tithe is the general thing to the church. Giving, whether it's to a certain, should go above and beyond. Sometimes people miss that. I had somebody at church say, well, I serve. Okay, that's fine, but serving doesn't stop there. We serve with our giving, we serve with our time, we serve with, and they were trying to compartmentalize it. It's all, right, when you look at finances, okay? So, just anything there. Lastly, I say on the growth part, this is interesting. How many churches, I can think of some in the community, their growth is transfer growth. In other words, they got disgruntled at one church, they go to the same denomination of another, right? Or, I won't use specifics, but if the pastor leaves, he's got a following, they go with him to the other church. You've got growth, but is it really conversion growth, people getting saved? No, it's just, maybe it's not necessarily bad. You see, it's transfer from one church to another. It may look good, but then that church lost that group that left, right? So, transfer growth is okay, but the best growth is conversion. When you have no growth, then we need to look at things. No growth, then how can we change? How can the Lord change that? Let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. This is a great passage on what Paul talks about here. I don't have it bookmarked, but it's probably one you know about. But Paul introduced the church, and in his day, it was radical. Listen, this is not just for the Jews, it's for the Gentiles. And that took great adjustment for them to get that. But in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul said this is the purpose of the church. And so let's read it together if we can. All right? So he begins by saying this, verse 11. He gave some as apostles, we'll think about it in that day and time. Some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as pastors and teachers is really one and the same there. Some churches have revivals. Have you ever been in the churches that have revivals where they bring in
Yeah,
an
there's a lot,
evangelist?
yeah.
Has that ever happened here?
Oh, yes, several times.
Yeah,
Not in a long, not since I've been here, we've never
But
had
it's
one.
long.
Mostly in my childhood.
yeah,
So even with that revivals and stuff, you know, we used to, I remember sitting, having chairs in the aisles and stuff like that. And then later on, we had a revival, got fewer and fewer and fewer.
yeah.
We need revivals.
Yeah, my parents know, probably Barbara knows too, at Arthur, I knew, Lisa and I were on vacation and it was a providential moment. God allowed us to meet another pastor. It was really, I think about that a lot. Anyway, he lives in Florida and we invited him up to do, you know, he never even did a revival. But it was, we did a lot of promotion for it, but we did 3 nights and usually the Sunday's great and then, like you said, it dwindles down. We had a packed house all the nights he was there. I had one guy that said it was the best revival they've seen in 15 years. So sometimes that can revitalize just the energy of people with revival. So
And you know one thing, I hate to interrupt.
no, go ahead.
But one thing is, we have such a me world.
Oh, yes.
Me world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
getting someone to actually come to a revival for
Yeah.
several nights
Oh,
in a
yeah.
row and give up their night
yes, that's the truth.
is, you know what I mean?
Well, there was a tent revival in Fire Tower back in September. I mean, as soon as I saw the banner one day when I was driving by, I was like, I'm gonna be there. Christy Overton was one of the main ones that headed up. They had different speakers every night. It was great. They had baptisms there. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 nights. I went 2 of those nights anyway. It was great.
Sports with children have changed a lot in our society.
Yes, it's become almost an idol in
Yes,
and of itself
yes.
with ball and, yeah, yeah.
Growing up, Wednesday nights was almost as sacred as Sunday
Yes.
here and many other churches in our community. But it's not sacred on Sunday. We pass that whatever park up here, what is it called, the soccer field?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's full of cars on Sunday morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the time, yes.
Yeah.
So it's
Very true. Yeah, it's become competition. My neighbor next door they moved back to the east, but I kept trying to invite them, but it was the same thing, fall ball, just they had to go and stay at hotels, and he was good, but sometimes they think he's gonna be the next major leader. I mean, they got big ideas that don't always kind of, trying to relive childhood, but that's a good point, yeah.
Well, maybe we need to change this to a soccer field over there.
Might work, change. Yeah, all right. So looking at the next part of it, so evangelists, that's very important, pastors, teachers, and then what's the goal, first of all? For the equipping of the saints. So it's the building up of the saints for the work of ministry. That's verse 12. What does that mean? For the equipping of the saints. Who are the saints in verse 12? It's Christians. It's not just an elite group, right? It's believers. They're to do the work of the ministry, right? So that the leaders should equip them to do the work of service, or the work of ministry. And what will happen for the building up of the body? God is interested in spiritual growth, people getting saved, but He's certainly interested in numerical growth, right? So, and then what will happen? Then we will all attain to the unity of the faith. It doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, right? And I have read a devotional. Disagreement is inevitable, but how you learn to disagree is very important. How you interact with. By the way, Fox had a special. Lisa said, "Come on, you got to see this." Talked on it. Among the young people, 18 to 35-year-olds, they are, survey says, spiritually interested. They're not like just atheists, but they've kind of disconnected from organized church. Of course, with Fox, they got Catholics and it's hodgepodge of people. But it was an interesting panel that group is interested, but how do you connect them beyond the me, even if I'm going to have my time at home, I'm not going to go out because that takes away from. So they say they're spiritually interested, but it's kind of a self-absorbed thing, or they've got disenchanted with what they call organized church, organized Christianity. What has turned them off of that? What are some things you think are, we still go 5 or 10 minutes. What are some things that have turned them off of church?
Well, I can speak for someone who's, my husband, Byron, he has said more than once, he's part of our Trailblazers Bible study,
and he's brought up more than once, why are there denominations if we're all serving the same God, the same purpose? Why can't we do things together? Why do there have to be denominations? And I agree with that if we're all following God and we're all following His word, His truth.
Yeah.
I understand where he's, and I think that's where a lot of younger people, my son is one of them, he's kind of saying the same things. So I understand some of that. But the problem with a lot of younger people, if they don't have spiritual guidance in their homes or somewhere, and they're getting it only on the internet, there's so much up there that's not right, and it's causing a lot of confusion and
My
a lot of
son,
problems.
yeah, exactly. The internet can be, they think it's the source of truth,
Yeah,
and a lot of times it's the source of complete ignorance.
right.
Yeah, there's a both and with that. I agree. In fact, denominations can become a great divide, and yet denominations do have doctrinal differences. There's no doubt about that.
And red tape just causes problems.
So, yeah.
Schools of higher learning, that they have, tried to.
Oh, it's in indoctrination.
Yeah. Yeah, I know at least one or two people, kids went to college. I mean, I'd say good Christian kids with Christian parents, they come back different.
Oh, wait. Why do kids check their faith out when they go to college? Books have been written on it. It happens over and over.
Yeah.
Either it has not become personal.
They become liberal.
Yeah.
That's it.
Go ahead.
Well, that's what, I mean, everybody knows that
As liberal as you can
the
get.
church growth in general,
Yeah.
in the U.S., I don't know how far out, has been downward for several years. I don't know if you know, I can't say, but back in the 80s, it seems like churches were growing, but now you see all the statistics, and it's down. So we all of us have to do something different. When you hear all this, what we're fighting, battling against, and I mean, when I started reading this thing yesterday, he was giving all the excuses why people from COVID, decided to just check out permanently and so forth. And I began to think, wait a minute, the church is the bride of Christ. I think we've lost, to some extent, the fundamentals. That's what's happened with the youth and so forth. And so, I don't have an answer. It's tough to say. Let's turn it around and get the kind of growth we had in the 80s and 90s. The church in general, no matter the denominations. So but it's happening. Yeah, like you actually see the kids going away to school. I mean, the staff at these universities is, over 90% liberal. Democrat, I hate to bring that into it.
Well, and then even they were saying, and Fox said, Max Lucado and Caleb, 12% were down from what they used to call themselves Christians. But even in the trades now, the average age for the trades that is so needed is 55 and up is the average age. They're going to phase out, so who's going to repair unless you're maybe some of you are, repair some of this stuff. That group is phasing out, and they get degrees that they can't use, and then they're plus getting indoctrinated. So, yeah, absolutely. So this is what he's driving at in the book. A couple more verses, and then let's see. So if you get the unity, and that can be qualitatively, because we do want to, in fact, Jesus prayed in John 17 that we be, think about it, united in Him. He's in us and we are in Him. Think about that. That's the critical issue. That we're in Christ and He's inside of us by the Holy Spirit. That's what the Lord wants. But the more that we are Christ-like, the more we will be unified, right? At least in our attitudes. So in the bottom for 13. So we all attain the unity of faith and the knowledge of the Son of God. So He wants us to keep growing. And Abby, I'm getting personal, but I don't mind saying it. But, well, I probably ought to say it. Let me just say in general, okay? I'll use a general statement. This goes to the internet, all right? I know this from a lot of sources. Some people that are easily duped on the internet, they don't know the Bible very well. That's part of the problem. I don't mean you have to be a scholar, but if you know the Bible, you can debunk some of this stuff. But if you don't know, then you're an easy prey. You go to college or what have you. And this is where I salute homeschoolers or private schools, but it can even be done in the public school setting if it's done the correct way. So anyway, but as a result, verse 14, so we come to the fullness of Christ, and that's all. It's a personal thing as well as a church thing. As a result, we will no longer be children tossed here and there by waves, just the things we've been talking about, whether it's the institution, the college, a lot of things, the internet. It's really changed. I think that, and then what you talked about, kids are so different now. I think a lot of it has to do with that, technology. You know, it's just, it is a different world in
I
many
think-
ways.
Not only just social media, TV.
Yeah,
You cannot turn on the TV and look at hardly any series or show or something that is not going to have a person who is homosexual,
yeah,
or there are other also things that are ungodly.
The language.
It's like they're bombarded and you become desensitized
You
and accepting society.
yes,
You don't
Yes,
have,
that
tells the truth.
Yes, and all of that is,
It's in your face
it's
all the time.
it's the devil, it's the evil one.
Yeah.
It's finding his way into our society to turn us away from God.
Mhm.
And that's why it's so important for the return of this nation and
Yeah, and that's the thing that Max was saying, revival can still happen, he didn't get on a negative note. I was on a radio program once as a guest in California, it was actually a program in Alabama, it's weird, but anyway, the guy was saying in my interview, he was away from television, this is back in the 70s, 7 years, he didn't watch television for 7 years, I don't know if anybody could take that challenge, he wasn't trying to, it just happened, and then when he got back on, he was appalled at how television had changed in that 7 years, and that was back before it really got, you know, so, I mean, like anything, there's still some good things, but yeah, exactly, so that's a really good point. Verse
you were
15,
talking about the shows,
yeah,
the advertisements for different things.
oh, yeah,
right, but
So, you know what I'm saying, even
yes.
if there's a show that is halfway decent, you know, Andy Griffith or something, I don't know, but
then they'll have some
they're gonna
great,
throw something in there.
One for alcohol, there's so many commercials for alcohol, it's
Yeah.
horrible. I think about, because I've got, you know, in my family, my brother, my son has struggled, and there's so many commercials, you can't watch anything, it's just always a
yeah,
reminder,
Yeah.
a temptation for people who struggle.
yeah.
You know, one
absolutely.
thing that I've really been aware of, and I guess it's because I read so much, and I've actually been reading Perry's library. It is stuff that I haven't read before. Anyway, what I find when I'm looking at TV, and I love TV, don't get me wrong, I love PBS. Even PBS is disappointing me with some of the stuff that you see. But witchcraft is woven in. Even I had to preview the children's programming for my 4-year-old granddaughter to be able to see, because, you know,
Sneak stuff
I was
in.
showing her something and I thought it was just fine. I was looking at it with her, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh gosh. And I had to distract her so I could cut it off. It's amazing how much witchcraft is in television, children's programming, and of course on the internet. So from a very, very, very early age,
Mhm.
children who are not supervised are being programmed. And even in my latter years of teaching, parents did not read to children at night. They put them in front of a TV or a Game Boy, and the divide in the family got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now when you go to a restaurant, you see everybody in the family looking at their phone.
Oh, yeah, it's
There's
funny.
no conversation.
Exactly.
Even at the beach, Perry and I were amazed. Here are kids out here playing, but the parents are both sitting in their chairs looking at their phones.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it's sad.
And you can't get young people to talk to telephone anymore because they're so used to texting. Just call them on the telephone, but you can't get them to do that. Exactly. So we'll have to close this out in a couple minutes. Next week, highlight in chapter 1 things that are important to you in the book, and we'll definitely talk about that and how to, and it, again, as you see, it is I like the one author, he really does, being either a nominal Christian and really getting back involved, and kind of the Washington DC, and the other one kind of, takes it more from, well, they both do, but how to rediscover church after the pandemic. And the pandemic is still going on when that was written. I think it was mentioned that the average church got hit by 10 or 15% just as a result of COVID. But if these people say, well, I can't go back if they're in shelter, is that everything? Did they still go out and go to the grocery store? Is there any inconsistencies there? Why they can't come? And some people can. There's always a church that has shut-ins. So the Methodists have always done really well with the retirement home system. Is really phenomenal when you look at that. The different denominations, I hate to use that word, but have done some good things that have become kind of their trademark. But anyway, think about it on a personal level. And I might just sit down and use the podium next time, we'll see. But and then as a church level, and then maybe come up with some ideas, how can we reach? And I told one church, look, maybe the goal for God is for us to reach the elderly. Maybe it's not, maybe that's the group that church is supposed to reach. Because every age group is reachable. So it's just, where does the growth come? And how does the Lord do it? The most important thing is personal growth, right? That's really the critical thing. So
I'm really surprised to hear the age group for Open Door.
yeah, that's a guy that does the finances.
I've been there,
Yeah.
and the preacher there, his wife was Amanda's roommate in college, and because his father suddenly passed away, Greg.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Because that, Aaron, and he said in his 40s, and a lot of these homeschool moms go to Open Door. And so I'm really surprised to hear that
Yeah.
55 up.
It started in '98. It wasn't no bigger than the church I was at, and they just exploded. The school helped. That they started a lot of things. You never know what the Lord blesses, and sometimes it's from Him. Other denominations it might not be, but it's who the Lord uses. But yeah, those different dynamics play into it. The homeschoolers who go there. Some I knew went there, and then when their kids aged out, they just were going there for that reason, then they left. It's not an immediate connection.
Is it just outside of Wilmore?
Yes, yeah. Buildings going up after building. So anyway, all right. Well, I don't want to overstay our time, especially if we got a lunch outing. But thank you, Lori, for doing the food for everybody, and invite people to come. I'd love to see this group grow. I really would. So. And by the way, this is something, if you miss, it's not, oh, you can't come back. No. It's not going to be that at all. I'm not going to do anything where if you miss, you're out of action. Not at all. Whatever study we do, it will be something you can pick it right up where you are, okay? So hope those sheets were just a help. I thought today to use that because I thought it kind of goes along with the introduction of the book. All right, let me close in prayer. All right, Sean? Lord, thank you. This is a great group. And all from different backgrounds. I just look at each person. I know, to some extent, something about the people where they worked here and their church life. And we have different backgrounds, but we bring, even to the discussion here, a lot of innovative ideas. Sometimes, Lord, we have a question mark as to, we see these nice things that people have written. How to accomplish that is beyond us. You want to use us, but it certainly is going to take your work and the work of the Holy Spirit for something really spiritual to happen. So it's not just a man-made thing. And so we want to be available. We want you to teach us personally, help us to grow, and help us to learn from your word so that as we read today, we can unite together and grow to full maturity personally and corporately, as wherever we go to church, and even within our own family setting or with our own circle of friends. It could be a different dynamic depending on the person here, but I pray that you allow that circle of relationships, family, friends, to be a great connection so that we have people that we can call, share our struggles with, our victories with, and that we grow in our relationships with each other, but most importantly, with you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, thank you. Is there any leftovers or are they called?
Yes, they're gonna be cold, but that's okay.
Take home.
And Michael,